Welcome to the Sharpe Way show. Yes, it is 7 p.m. on the East Coast, so you gotta look at my mug. Yes, you do. I'm so happy that you are here today. Please do me a favor. You know what I'm going to ask you? Like, comment, share. Please do that. Everybody out there, the more you like, the more you comment, the more the share, the better off it is. And of course, if you want to help me out, you can many ways. One of them, you can support the show. You can go over to patreon.com/sharpeway, throw me a couple bucks. Love that. If you've got those big Trump bucks coming in, throw some my way. If you don't, no worries. You can do something else for me. You can head over to theadvocates.org, the human respect test. Take that. It's free. Cost you nothing. Share it. My sponsor's happy. You're happy. The link is in the show description. So click there. Life is good. If you happen to like CBD products, do me a favor. Head over to Grown Selection, libertarian-owned company. Pick up your products there if you like them. Sharpe Way 20. You get 20% off. Everybody's happy. But no matter what, for free, like, comment, and share. I'm very lucky today. I have with me someone who I wanted to get last week, but like the world exploded last week, so I kind of had to push off. She was so flexible, so I'm very glad she did it. Activist, author, journalist, chief of the Velvet Chronicle, the woman herself, Julia Robertson. How are you?
I'm good. How are you? I'm so glad to be here.
Absolutely. And for those who are interested more in Julia, please head over to thevelvetchronicle.com to see what she's got going on, stuff she's writing, all kinds of cool stuff. Now, Julia, I guess the number one thing I wanted to bring up is the average person who thinks about the LGBT community or LGBT plus community thinks of it as almost like a monolith, like it's just those people. I'm doing the air quotes. If anyone's listening, they'll be mad at me, right? It's that those people. See, it's them over there, and they're all one group of people, and they all do one thing, and that's them. But you have talked about there's a big difference.
Absolutely, yeah. There is this idea that the LGBTQIA plus as it's expanding to include just about everyone, including straight people who identify as queer. So it's really like, becomes something that doesn't want to be exclusionary of anybody. And in that situation, lesbians have definitely become the minority voice and really not much of a voice at all. Because if you're a lesbian, nobody's giving you the microphone. And if you've identified into lesbian, then you're speaking on behalf of lesbians, but that's not really covering the lesbian voice. And more lesbians have been pushed to the side and silenced a lot, like even in our own publications and organizations. If you look at the top dogs, they're not lesbians. There was a couple of years ago a lesbian publication that I kind of got into it a little bit with because they had changed me in their interview of my novel to being queer and LGBTQ, but they did it as though I had said it. So they were interviewing
I see.
me as though I'd said it. And when I said something about it, I did finally get a very honest response, which I appreciated from the founder. And I directly said, how many lesbians do you have on staff at your lesbian publication? And she said, one.
Wow.
One lesbian. So the advice that's going out to young lesbians, unbeknownst to them, is often coming from non-lesbians. So when they're saying things like lesbians, you should be wearing condoms. Yes, condoms for penis and vagina sex. And these young lesbians are absorbing this information, which is part of the cotton ceiling. They're absorbing that information, and it's becoming normalized because.
Hold on. I want to go there. Right, that to me didn't make any sense. The last time I checked, in my head at least, when two lesbians had sex, there was no penis involved. That will require a condom. Maybe I've misunderstood how that worked, but that's what I always thought. And then you just mentioned the cotton ceiling. I've heard this only like recently. Tell me what the cotton ceiling is.
It's a phenomenon where we're discussing lesbian underwear as a ceiling that needs to be like the glass ceiling, need to break through, that males want to break through. And it's basically a form of progressive gay conversion therapy.
Conversion gay.
So lesbians are now in an environment where they're being told that they should unlearn their genital preferences, that they're preferences.
Mm-hmm.
That their preferences, sexual preferences, I'm going to do lots of air quotes today.
Okay, I like that.
That their preferences, which we all know sexuality isn't a preference, it's an orientation, and saying that it's a preference is kind of homophobic. But we've come to a point in history where it is referred to as a preference, and that preference needs to be unlearned, is what we're unlearned.
So if I'm hearing this right, you're saying there's the T part or the trans part within the LGBT community is being much more aggressive in saying that, almost like saying lesbians aren't really lesbians, like they're just something else. They're not. I mean, they're that if you're a lesbian and you don't want to date a trans woman, that in some way you're wrong or bad or homophobic or something. Is that what I'm hearing?
I hesitate to put this on the T. I think old school transsexuals have been aware and have becoming more aware of what's going on and have been
okay
about it. I hesitate to put it on that. I put it more on gender ideologists.
Okay.
And gender ideologists can be just about anybody.
Okay. Okay. So some people are actually using the trans community to push their agenda.
I would say it's more of like males.
Okay.
So males who might identify as lesbians, and not that this matters, but males who might look like you or someone's father or brother, who just identify into something. So they just boom, identify as this. And then,
oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, I got you.
They're considered bigots for not considering them as partners, potential partners.
This reminds me of, I remember I think it was Riley Dennis who did a video on this, saying that if you are someone who would not date someone who's trans, right? If you decide you would not date someone who's trans, that you are somehow discriminatory or bad, or she implied that you were wrong, right? She implied that you were wrong,
right?
But then your response, I remember, was you made a very specific distinction between sex and gender,
right?
And you were saying that, you know, people who are homosexual may not be homogenderal, right? Those are two separate things.
Homogenderal, no. Like, you know, lesbians have a very long history of flipping off gender rules and really hard against the patriarchy, which means that historically there's going to be more lesbians that are that don't conform to societal norms. And if you start to think about like our relationships and the relationships that we've been in historically, that the gender thing doesn't make sense. Like gender meaning the roles and stereotypes that are assigned to people based on their sex has nothing to do with sex.
So if I get it, that means you're basically someone who's lesbian,
right,
is attracted to a woman. It doesn't matter whether that woman happens to comply to gender roles or not, right? That isn't an issue, right?
This is something I think that straight people and even bisexuals or people who identify into lesbian that aren't lesbians have a hard time understanding. Like the concept that someone, for example, who looks like my wife and has, you know, short hair and rocks what would be called maybe like men's clothes, although we can't really call them men's clothes because, like, what does that even mean?
Right.
But basically just rails against all the things that are kind of put upon you from the time that you come into the world. You know, it gets into some pretty murky water.
Well, you have some fans here, by the way.
That most people are incorrectly female.
I want you to know, though, you have some fans here already. Andrew says he just read some of your work in the Huffington Post, and it was an interesting read.
Oh, thanks.
David says, wow, you're blowing my mind. So I think some people are caring. And Nicole says, this is important activism right now.
Oh, thank you.
So you have some fans. That's good, right?
Yes. Yeah. So, and I've really not met a lot of people that I've explained this to that didn't get it. I think there's been one person that I can think of, or two maybe, that I can think of off the top of my head that really at the end of the day didn't get it and were offended by something I'd said. It's more typical that people are like, oh, well, this is completely common sense and totally rational, and I can't believe that this is even an issue.
Well, my problem personally is, I think because I live in New York City, and because me being in the business world, I've always believed, and wrongly, when I ran for governor, my eyes were really open. But I always believed wrongly that, well, this war is kind of over, right? Like, who cares about
Right.
gender and sex anymore, right? It doesn't matter. This war is over, right? Ah, come on, this is much ado about nothing.
A lot of people think that. People in my own family were surprised. They were like, "Oh, I thought everything was cool and
Yes,
it was dandy and la la la." And I'm like, "No, a lot of really bad, weird stuff goes on every time we leave the house." And it's only gotten worse with the whole like ask my pronouns thing. And we're in a situation now where it used to be understood, wherever we went, that we were lesbians, and now it's a situation where people are afraid to use pronouns, or they're like pointing at my wife, or they're just, I'm like, oh yeah, my wife's actually going to have the same thing, we're both going to eat the same dinner, and then they're like, is that what he would like?
Oh,
is that what you're having? So there's animosity now that wasn't there before. A lot of the stuff, because lesbians are naturally kind of more non-conforming, to roles and stereotypes, a lot of the stuff and anger is taken out on the lesbian community. Because we're visibly just out there just being who we've always been.
Right. Well, no, what bullies tend to go with whoever or whomever they think is the weakest, right? That's what bullies go for.
Right.
So if you look the weakest to them, they go after whoever they think is the weakest.
Exactly.
Sure. I get that completely. But I want to keep going down this road if I could. The cotton sealant idea. A lot of people are upset about it because they feel that what you're saying is that somehow a trans woman is not as good of or not the same as a lesbian woman, right? That a lesbian woman is somehow better. And the term I heard many times is the word of TERF. Mm-hmm. That a TERF is someone who just basically is a lesbian who hates trans people, right? That's the concept. Tell me about that. Where do you stand there?
That TERF hasn't been used on me a whole lot. It has been, though. It was used to get an article that I wrote, I think, in 2016 or 2017, pulled down or unpromoted from Huffington Post. It was called Co-opting the L, Homophobia and the Thought Police.
Got it.
It was promoted and then it was unpromoted. That's one of the first times that I think that word or slur was used on me. It's not been used a ton, but it has been used. It means trans exclusionary, which I'm not. I don't exclude trans people. I have lots of trans friends. Radical feminist. I'm not a radical feminist. I'm a lesbian feminist. And I don't really subscribe to any particular ideologies in the same way that I don't really subscribe to a specific religion. So what was the question?
No, it's all good. You got more fans. Tom is saying it's a pleasure to learn about things, and be talked to instead of talked at. He's liking it. He's like, it's an interesting topic.
I try that. I try to do that.
And Lewis says he made a change here. Lewis says trans activists are meant bullies through and through. And I'm not sure that's true, but I tell you one thing that I remember that really did bother me. And this was during the campaign last year when CNN was doing an equality town hall. And they had, the candidates come up, and one of them was specifically targeted towards the LGBTQ community, right? And during one of those, and Anderson Cooper, a gay man, is like, he's the guy who's running this thing. He's emceeing it. And I think it might have been, I don't remember which candidate was up, but a black trans woman got up and was yelling and screaming and like, it's about us and blah, 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 and we're being hurt. And she was taking up the entire thing. And Anderson tried to calm her down and said, look, we're doing this because of you. You're part of this community, right? Why are you mad at us? And the candidate shut him down, right? He's like, no. Look, let her speak. And they were like, let her speak. And I felt, I'm not a gay man, but I felt like Anderson. I'm like, we're here for you. Why are you yelling at us? If you're mad, go yell at the people who hate you. That would be the better people to yell at, not us. But I did feel like she was bullying us. I did feel that. And again, I'm not saying that's every, trans activist at all. I'm not. I'm bringing up what Lewis said and saying, that's how I felt too.
And I avoid using trans activists, quote, for that reason. I usually say like gender ideologists or gender
Okay.
ideology activists, because I don't want to point incorrectly a finger at a community that's been around for a while and has been very peaceful. And transsexuals in general, they've wanted to be treated equally.
Yeah.
But the activism that we're seeing isn't about being treated equally anymore. It's about really enforcing an ideology and making it mandatory and controlling language. The person who was angry, I believe that you're referring to, was mad about suicide statistics.
Oh, is that what it was? I couldn't even tell.
I could be wrong. I do know that the suicide statistics that were given are incorrect, blown out of proportion. Like in UK, for example, there's been 0 murders of people who identify as transgender in like the last 5 years.
Wow.
And when it happens here in the States, it sometimes has to do with things like prostitution.
Sure.
And other violent situations. Sometimes the act is committed by another person who identifies as trans. I won't get into that too much, but the anger that's created from that is very real, because people believe what they're being told. So
absolutely.
A lot of I did statistics on this. A lot of people just read headlines.
Right.
They never read the article, and then most people don't think to fact check things.
Well,
so they're not getting to like go, oh, is this true? So a lot of lies just get repeated and repeated and repeated. And
I want to go back to lesbians though, and for some reason, it's odd. For some reason, I've had a lot of lesbian fans throughout my career. I'm not sure why that's true, but I've had a lot.
For a couple of them, you've got a lot of interesting things to say.
Yeah, so that's been. I appreciate that, but I've always felt like, until recently, basically seeing you and others that you turned me on to. I've always thought that lesbians were on the march. They're on the move. Like, things are good. That's how I saw it, right? Politically, they're like, they're lesbian mayors. They're lesbian people in Congress, right? When I ran for governor, Cynthia Nixon, famous lesbian, she's
bisexual. And
is she?
This is kind of, I'm not 100% sure, but this is kind of the thing that I'm talking about, where there's an illusion that's created in the mainstream. There's an illusion of this powerful lesbian who's in charge. But a lot of the time, lesbian is used in a lot of ways. It's sometimes used by bisexuals. Sometimes it's used as a refuge for women who've suffered abuse and horrific things that I would wish upon my worst enemy.
Hold on. Don't walk. That's a big one. Tell me about that. Don't walk on from that. Why? How would that? I really want to know. I don't want to. How would that be used as a label? You saying someone would put a label on a woman, or a woman would accept that label herself?
Yeah, you could end up identifying in the same way that a lesbian might identify into being straight, or identify into being something other than who they are, kind of working against their own nature for a reason that maybe is psychologically driven or driven from a reason other than actually being.
All right. So let me try to go down this road, and you tell me if I'm wrong here. I'm going to go where my head is pulling me. You tell me if I'm wrong. So a woman is unfortunately a victim of, say, male sexual abuse, say that. And then because of that trauma, she then decides, I don't ever want to go through that again. So my brain, I'm saying I'm lesbian. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, to not acknowledge that is something that happens, I think it does a disservice to the lesbian community, because a lot of people who identify into lesbian end up trying to speak over us and on behalf of us. And a lot of the times they're louder than us, and they're given platforms bigger than the platforms that go to lesbians, which right now is like none.
The most zealous are always the converted.
Right. The people who are very loud about things. And this is something that not only perpetuates a misunderstanding and misinterpretation of lesbian, it perpetuates the idea of lesbian existing for the male gaze. It perpetuates the idea of the lesbian who can be converted eventually. It perpetuates the abuse of children because
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up because, I don't mean to be, I'm just going to be forward with you.
do it.
There is a part of the macho male that thinks he can convert the lesbian because he's so super hot or amazing.
Right.
There is that's a thing. You're right. I mean, there are guys like, she just hasn't had me, then she'd be straight or whatever. So I think that does exist.
Oh, sure.
But I don't think it exists I think most men aren't that way. That might be some fantasy some guys have, right? But I don't think that's what most men think. I feel like most men have accepted, okay, she's lesbian.
Right. You'd be surprised.
Okay, tell me.
And a lot of that has to do with mainstream portrayal of lesbians. So mainstream, when you see lesbians portrayed in the mainstream, which is male dominated, as particularly through media, they're often seen as either I'm going to use the word femme and butch, but I'm going to say it with air quotes, like categorically.
Sure.
I'm aware that the world might view me as femme. I'm aware that the world might view my wife as butch. It's not necessarily something we're like, oh, we're butch and femme.
Right, gotcha.
It perpetuates the idea of two femmes only ever being together.
Yes.
When a butch lesbian is shown on TV, she is the punchline, and she wants to be a man. And in most cases on TV, people who might be considered categorically butch are then going to, especially nowadays, they're going to transition to become. So there's been a sort of conditioning of people to view lesbians as pliable and sexually flexible.
Got it.
And this is something that, think about the L Word, the two main characters, Bet and Tina. They invite a man into the bedroom with them, and they're trying to have a baby. So it puts lesbians in a dangerous situation because it creates this idea of,
No, you just brought up a very interesting thing, right? If you had a story with two gay men, you wouldn't imagine, they're going to invite a woman into the bedroom.
No, that's not something you see often.
Right.
But very, 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 I did an article called 100 Girl Meets Girl Pairings and Not a Butch in Sight. The Huffington Post, it was reposted to AfterEllen, it was then posted to the Velvet Chronicle, and it basically, and I'm going to add to it, it basically goes through how invisible people who are lesbians have become and the impact it's had on children to not see themselves and the impact it's had on children to only understand themselves through the straight gaze as being men.
So let me go that road. By the way, someone thinks I'm not wrong. He knows it's true. There is that thing that men, we want to think that we're that cool. Sadly, we aren't that cool. But anyway, the point I want to bring up here is you are adamantly against what is a trend now, what people think is the right or good thing now, which is allowing children to transition early, right? Oh, I know that my daughter is really my son, or my son is really my daughter, so we have to start transition him or her. We've got to do, we've got to dress them up a certain way. We've got to call them a certain thing. We have to maybe even do surgery on them before they're even teenagers. And you are against this. Tell me.
Well, yeah, there's statistically speaking, 75% of these kids, if they're allowed to grow up, would be LGB as adults. And
wait, you said 75%. So you're telling me
the majority
out of 4 kids who say, hey, mom or dad, I'm trans, they then transition. You're saying 3 out of those 4 are actually gay or lesbian.
They would have otherwise, statistically, they would have otherwise grown up to be LGB. And 85% of them would have grown up to be LGBS, S meaning straight.
So 10% of them would have been straight.
You're talking about 85% of desistance, what's called like desistance rate. Okay. And, in the US, we're seeing kids as young as 1 being labeled as trans. You're seeing kids as young as 8 being medicalized. You're seeing kids as young as 12 and 13 having double mastectomies performed on them, way before they ever have a chance to reach full cognitive brain development.
So double mastectomy and the kid's 14.
12 and 13 in the U.S. They're as young as 12 and 13 in the U.S.
Wow.
So imagine like all the things that you thought when you were a kid. And then imagine somebody walking around and saying like, taking a 1.5-year-old toddler and being like, this is my lesbian toddler. People think they were nuts. But you have people saying, this is my transgender child. And everybody's going, oh, bravo. Bravo.
But you told me something which
that's a big problem, and it's really scary.
Yes.
It's really scary to the lesbian community to see it happen, because most of us think like, oh, that could have been me.
Yeah. Well, the others, you brought things like, kids are maybe struggling with either same-sex attraction.
Absolutely.
Or they may be struggling with feeling unattractive themselves, that no one will love them in their body. They may think all those things.
Right.
And then they get confused. And then, parents, homophobia, the world says, just don't be what you are. Be the other thing. Right. And then so even parents are saying you should, don't be gay, be trans.
This happens a lot, and people forget that the U.S. is a melting pot. So we have people from every place and culture and background and religion living in the U.S. So you've got people who are extremely religious fanatics, and they have a gay kid, and this is documented. Even kids who are being promoted by HRC, it's documented that they've had parents that are like, oh my God, I have a gay kid, la la la, oh my God, I'm freaking out. And then they're like, oh, thank God, you're just transgender. And they label the toddler. You have places like Iran where being homosexual is punishable by death, but being transgender is A-okay. And the government will actually pay for your conversion.
Wow.
So people forget that in this country, there are plenty of parents who come from cultures, religions, backgrounds, where having a gay kid is the worst possible thing. And this is a form of progressive gay conversion therapy for a lot of parents who are just like, well, bringing their kids through, labeling their kids. The kid's not going to remember.
Right.
When you were a kid, when do your memories start? Because mine started about 6.
I have some around 4-ish, like a Christmas around like 4-ish.
Okay.
And then like 5, I'm a bit clearer.
Okay.
Around 5-ish. I'm starting to get clear around 5.
Okay, mine are around 6, and then I get more clear around 8. So theoretically speaking, if you've got one of these parents who are popping a label on you and telling you you're the opposite sex, one day you're this 8-year-old kid. You don't know how you got there.
Mm-hmm.
You just know that you just eventually, maybe if you're lucky, figure out that you like the wrong stuff. You like the wrong haircut. You wanted a buzz cut. You wanted to wear suits, and your parents read into it. And instead of, going along and be like, oh, my kid's a kid. She wants to be a juggler. She wants to marry her dad when she grows up. Imagine kids locked into marrying their dad when they grow up because this is something they thought when they were a kid.
Right.
I love my dad. I'm going to marry daddy. Not just because that's an experience. I have there are kids who have lots of different notions and ideas when they're kids. Imagine you start locking kids into these ideas in a medicalized way.
So let me take a couple of comments. So people are coming up with some comments when we talked about earlier. Bernard says, I have male friends who were abused as children and now identify as gay. I wonder if they are really gay or if this is their response to the traumatizing experience. It's an interesting question, isn't it? I mean, we also see this in prison, right? The prison population, the same issue.
Right.
Men who are gang raped will often then identify as gay. Now, is that because of the trauma?
In some cases, maybe, and in some cases, maybe not. It's the same as with straight people. So if a straight woman is sexually abused by a male, is she not going to be interested in males?
I think we were talking about that, right? The trauma could make her think that, right?
If a straight woman is straight, she's likely going to be straight regardless, but there's a possibility that she might find refuge in identifying out of being straight.
Is there a chance here that the person who was abused, or in the case of prison, literally gang raped by other men, do they does the brain, and this is just a question, ignorance question, you may not know, I may not know, but does the brain just say, you know what, I can process this better if I say that I was gay the whole time, and I actually enjoyed the process. I was okay with it because I'm not demasculated because I was gang raped. I'm gay, so I can process this better. Am I going down the wrong road here?
A lot of different psychological breaks can happen, or breakdowns can happen. It's not any more likely or unlikely that a gay person would experience this as a straight person would experience it. So a gay child, for example, might be sexually assaulted by a male and still end up being straight.
Okay.
I'm sorry, still end up.
I know what you mean.
Just as a straight man, it's all kind of going to be based on each person's individual experience, and there are things that can definitely break inside of a person that will impact things like sexuality. I don't know exactly of any studies on this or that I'm aware of, but it's a very interesting question.
But someone else brings up, really, that's actually refreshing. Not many in our community take that position with kids transitioning. It's true. It feels like you're doing the wrong thing, and parents feel like they're doing the right thing to support their children. But I get your logic. I've always said this, and I think that, in my view, being libertarian, I always focus on something. I want people to do what they want, however they want to do it. And when it comes to sexuality, as long as they are consenting adults, do you. Well, but that's the key: consenting and adults.
Right, and the key is the majority in our community are no longer us. The lesbians have become the minority, and even though I would go so far as to say lesbian gays have become the minority. When you start tagging a million different letters to the end of a group that was set up to protect a minority, the minority becomes the minority within the group that minority. So really, there's no group currently set up to protect gay and lesbian people as a minority. So our voice is drowned out a lot of the time. I think with gay men, sometimes it takes them a little bit longer to get to where lesbians are with this and say, I think for lesbians, maybe it's a little more obvious or something. There's also fragile masculinity. So this idea of like, well, we don't want Marsha Johnson to be affiliated with us, so there's a fragile masculinity involved.
I don't understand that piece. Help me out with that.
So Marsha Johnson, up until 5 days before he died, identified as a gay man. But we're seeing a major revision of Marsha Johnson as a trans woman.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So there's this kind of fragile masculinity that does exist within a set or a subset of the gay male community that really wants to distance themselves from femininity because they see it as less manly to be.
So it's gay men who see femininity as less manly.
And men in general, and a lot of people, to be fair, see femininity as less feminine. So, with Marsha Johnson, at one point, Marsha, aka Malcolm, was asked not to be in the Pride Parade.
Okay.
So, and there is this kind of like separation, like, well, we don't want to really be associated with that. And there's a number of men who've analyzed and looked at that. Like Fred Sargent is a huge, he's a Stonewall veteran, and he's very much an ally to lesbians, and has really taken a look at a lot of this stuff and said, why is this person who identified up until 5 days before they died on record in a documentary as a gay man being...
You're almost erasing the gay instead of the trans, right? You're almost erasing the gay in a way.
Right.
Let me grab some more comments if I can real fast. Terrence says, it's a very interesting statistic, eye-opening when you think about those numbers. I think Terrence is talking about the 75% number you brought up, which kind of blew my mind too.
Right, it's gay conversion therapy. You got the majority, not just a small fraction, the majority of these kids that would be LGBT And it's a massive human rights violation. And people are just turning a blind eye to it. And
Yep.
HRC is all about the Benjamins. They're just money, 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 money. Where's the money coming from? Okay, we could get on board with this.
Yes.
And actually taking straight parents, putting them on the forefront. So now we've got straight parents talking on our behalf. That's great. What else is new?
Wow. Okay.
Parents are wide-eyed in these videos like there's a path.
So Bobby thinks it's absurd. Yes, it's absurd.
It's pro-child abuse.
And yes, and Dustin says, how's this legal? Aren't we supposed to protect the rights of our children and not force our delusions on them? I'm with you, right? But it's hard, right? This is social pressure, right? Because the second that I would say, hey, I don't think you should be transitioning your kid medically. If your kid wants to dress as a male or a female, good, right? Enjoy, whatever's your thing, fine. But if you begin to medically transfer your kid, if I were to say that's not a good idea, I'm a bigot. I'm a bad guy.
That's how people would view it until you explain it. So again, I've not had a situation where I've explained this to any normal, rational adult and had them be like, that makes absolutely no sense. Let's chop up the children. Like that's not something that happens in my day-to-day life. So I could talk to anybody, whether they're gay, bisexual, like whatever, and they're not going to kind of go up against this idea and be like, oh, let's do this. This is a great idea.
I think Twitter is mad at us. Brisbanean says Jesus died for our sins so we may repent and get right with God. I appreciate the view. I'm a big fan of Jesus, by the way. So thank you for your views.
And that's it. Gender ideology is a belief system. It's the same as a religion, and enforcing that belief system, especially legally enforcing that belief system, becomes.
There's my issue.
That's a cult.
Yes.
If you enforce a belief system, it becomes a cult.
Yes.
There's actually a little poster, like the cartoon that was made of me saying something like that a few years ago. A quote that I put out basically saying, this is a belief system and you enforce it, it's a cult. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing a legal enforcement of gender ideology.
Yes. So he says, so gays get tossed off of a building, talking about Iran, I guess, but trans is okay.
That's correct. Yes. It is homosexuality is punishable by death, not in a few places. But yeah, being trans is considered.
But that part, about the children being converted and now a parent believing, okay, now I'm good, right? Now I'm fine because my son or daughter isn't gay. They just were born in the wrong body.
Right.
That to me was shocking because I always assumed that if you were someone who was, cared about that issue, it's very important to you culturally, that being trans would be bad also, right? That all of them would be bad, right? Don't you want to be whatever, cis, whatever? Isn't that what you want to be, right? I assumed. But I was surprised when you said that. But after you said it, it did make sense.
The idea of people not conforming to the boxes that people really feel that they should be in is so unsettling to people. Mm-hmm. It's really unsettling for people to think, a little girl can be a badass if she rocks a buzz cut and wears a suit. That it doesn't occur to them like, oh yeah, my child's kick ass, like she wants a mohawk, yeah, let's do it. Instead, it really like deeply upsets them on a level that is really not. There's no word for it.
Okay.
Why are you so afraid of kids who don't conform? If a little boy wants to wear a princess gown and have long flowing hair, like why is that so unsettling to you? And
it doesn't mean he wants to be a girl.
This is a child. No, but environmentally speaking, kids process and absorb their environment. Mm-hmm. So if a child, for example, one of these HRC parents that's being put on a platform constantly now, if a child is being physically and emotionally abused for liking the wrong things, their environment is teaching them over and over again,
right.
You must be a girl. You must be a girl.
Absolutely.
And then the next thing you know, you got a kid going, I am a girl.
Right.
Their environment. No kid comes into the world and is like, I've got a problem. I got a problem here, people. They're
Well,
just being who they are, and they got an environment around them constantly being like, you're incorrectly female. You're incorrectly male. Let's fix you. You need to be fixed.
you had a conversation with a British interviewer, and you brought up stats. I think she brought them. I don't remember if you did, but I think she did. She talked about there were two types of the most common people who were transitioning when you look at groups. One was middle-aged men, and the other was a huge rash of teenage girls.
Yeah, that's ROGD, which was coined by Lisa Littman. Rapid onset, what's called gender dysphoria.
Rapid onset gender dysphoria. Okay.
And gender dysphoria is a term that's used to describe, teens. Well, or rapid onset gender dysphoria is a term used to describe teens who just kind of come out of nowhere, like, oh, this is who I am. And the parents are just like, wait, where did this come from?
Yeah, but I want to go to that idea of two parts. First, I want to go to the part of the boy dressing like a girl, or the girls saying they want to rock the mohawk. I mean, I look at someone like, famous to me is Eddie Izzard, right? Self-identified crossdresser. Guy likes to put on women's clothes. I'm doing that, right? Traditionally women's clothes. But he still likes women. He's straight. He's got a family, right? And he goes on stage sometimes dressed in male clothes and sometimes makeup and a dress. He's funny either way, but he goes on like that, and he discusses what I think if he goes, it's girl mode and boy mode or something like that. I mean, if a grown man could feel that way, couldn't a kid feel the same way? Couldn't a kid just enjoy the other gender's clothes here or there or something?
Yeah, and actually, I really respected Eddie Izzard before it was taken to this like kind of next level that it's at right now currently, because that was the idea. It was like, oh, I'm just doing this and I'm dressing how I want to dress and I'm cool either way, and I'm still representing for males. But when somebody starts to conflate the clothes that they're wearing and the haircuts they have with some kind of inner essence, then I have trouble with them enforcing that language onto other people. I didn't have a very big problem with it when it wasn't so politicized.
Yes, absolutely.
When it became very politicized, that these things started meaning something different. So saying something, for example, like Eddie Izzard is a woman, that impacts the rights that women have set up for themselves. And right now, for example, in the Equality Act, they're trying to erase sex as a protected class in law. Sex needs to be a protected class in law. Why? Because women are a subjugated class, and not just subjugated, but often horrifically subjugated class. So removing sex as a protected class in law is a bad idea. I'm part of a group that sent some amendment proposals to Congress with regards to the Equality Act. And we've simply asked that they remove gender identity and replace it with sexual orientation and sex stereotyping. Because then you're still protecting sex as a protected class, and you're also protecting people who identify as otherwise. You're protecting everybody.
I have a question regarding that, right? This is Logic Rex says, what does Julia think of the idea of gender or gender identity as compared to biological sex? Is gender a social construct, and is it accurate when people say there are only two genders?
Gender used to be used synonymously with sex because people were uncomfortable saying sex. They were like, "Oh, you can't say sex." Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But it's the understanding of it has evolved in different ways. Gender is the stereotypes that we expect based on someone's sex.
Okay.
So that's to say that if you have a little girl, you expect her to like pink. How crazy is that? You expect her to like ruffles. I didn't like ruffles. You expect her to want to wear dresses. my parents had a hard time getting me into heels and dresses. I've carried a purse like once. I think it was like a wedding or something. I didn't enjoy it and I left it on the table the whole time. So it's this expectation.
That's gender.
So if you're asking if there's lots of different ways to express yourself, absolutely. There's a million different ways to express yourself. There's a million different adjectives that you could use to express yourself. You know, I've been called a femmegress, which would be an adjective describing someone who's feminine but aggressive.
Okay.
You know, like, there's different terminology especially for dating purposes. Like you're talking to your friend, you're like, hey, I know this girl. She's kind of like, she's a little bit butch, but like she's kind of soft. And there's a lot of different ways to describe personalities, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything more than an adjective.
Okay.
I think the way language is being used is not only confusing people, but it's impacting the way we process information. So if someone is being, and we're seeing this a lot, reported in the news that a woman has committed a heinous crime. This is happening very often now, but it's actually a male who's committed that heinous crime. It's skewing, not only skewing statistics, which obscures male pattern violence.
Okay.
Which doesn't work well for feminists. We need to know what's going on. We need to know what's happening.
Okay.
It also reroutes the brain. And I'm very big on stuff having to do with the brain. I'll call myself a brain nerd.
Okay.
It reroutes the way you're processing the world around you in a way that's kind of Orwellian. So you start to see the world as, oh, a woman did this heinous crime. But, you know, there's this whole trans women are women, and it's being repeated and repeated and repeated. I understand the sentiment behind it. I think it's very nice, and it's got people mean well, but they're not understanding how it impacts things like laws. Then do these males get put into female rape shelters? The answer is yes, currently they do. And they can look exactly like you and be in a female rape center just for the fact of self-ID, which is, do you know what self-ID is?
Sure, absolutely.
So you just, boom, you identify this way and that's it. You're done.
Well, this becomes very challenging, doesn't it? Because it becomes...
Like 80% of males who identify as trans retain their male genitalia. And that's another thing people don't really realize, because you're messing with words, you're messing with the way people process things. And there was a time where I understood transsexual to mean something, and that meaning has changed immensely.
Well, this is my worry, and I want to bring this up because I want to desperately be an ally to the L, the G, the B, the T, the Q. I want to be an ally to consenting adults who want to live their life the way they want to live. I want to. But I find myself often overwhelmed and not understanding and making mistakes by mistake, right? Trying to be the ally that I want to be, and then often making mistakes. You know, Karen brings up, I'm 44. My 18-year-old daughter recently told me that our generation has been the greatest champion for the LGBTQ folks in history. And for that, I'm really proud. Let's keep it going. I agree with Karen, but I sometimes feel confused, to be fair with you. That's one of the reasons why I brought you on, because I want to hear different sides. And I don't want to make, if I make a mistake, I want to make it out of ignorance.
That perception is a popular perception, but the person who might think that their child is a great ally is probably right, that their child is very well intentioned, but their child is probably also not aware that a butch lesbian started the revolution at Stonewall. A black butch lesbian threw the first punch at Stonewall. And the reason they're not aware of it is because it's been hidden and rewritten by the letters tagged on to the end of LGBTQIA+++++. It's been revised. It's been rewritten. She's been rewritten as trans. This is someone who only died 5 years ago. I worked at the same bar that she worked at for many, many years. I'm friends with her guardianship. So this is a person who's been not only omitted and erased from history, but lesbians have been screaming about this for years, and no one gives a damn. Credit to Marsha Johnson, to two people who were not even there. So there might be a perception that, oh, this is the greatest generation, la la la. But this generation has possibly, in a lot of cases, especially with kids, again, who are just being in the environment around them, been very oppressive to actual lesbians and by extension anybody who's same-sex attracted, because there's a revisionism going on. There's a expunging of anybody who's categorically butch. There is no visibility. I mean,
no. The more you bring this up, I remember talking to someone about the lesbian porn industry, and I forgot who it was. I think I was actually talking to someone who was maybe part of SWAP, I think, but I was speaking to someone about it, and they were telling me that the lesbian porn industry, that most people who buy lesbian porn are actually men.
Of course, yeah.
And yeah, okay, I guess it makes sense, but that's what yeah, it's like in my head, I heard lesbian porn, so I went, oh, so lesbians purchase it. Right. She said, no, there's a separate like industry for like real lesbians for lesbian porn. That's what she told me. And I was surprised that even existed. She's like, no. If you're a real lesbian, like there's a separate porn section for you, because that's where, I guess to your point, that's where the butch lesbians might also be there also, right? That's my assumption. But if you look at normal...
I don't know too much about porn, but I've looked a lot at patterns in mainstream media, and I'll often point to, after my long list of, butch lesbians not being visible on TV or being used as a punchline, I'll look at the L word, and how the one categorically butch lesbian, or not even butch lesbian, butch actress performing the role of a butch lesbian, Moira became Max.
Got it.
That tell all of the lesbian viewers at home, not only were they not representing the lesbian community as it was, which would be made up of Moiras, but they're taking the one Moira and saying, oh, you must be a guy. And then Jane, who I guess maybe could categorically be considered somewhat butch, does the eyeliner and the little belly shirts and stuff, was presented as somebody who was a prostitute for males.
Got it.
It was like a prostitute. So you've got this very like bendy, flexible idea of lesbian that's constantly being presented to people as accurate, and it's through the male gaze. It's through, even if it's being done by a woman, that woman's got to do what she's got to do to get it on TV. She's got to have the storyline. So if they're like, oh, we just want lesbians to look like this, can we just pretend those lesbians don't exist? They're going to get their show on TV. Got it. Okay. It doesn't really help us in the way that it backfires.
Yes, I get what you're saying. Yeah. The will and grace was much better for gay men compared to the L word for gay women. I see what you're saying.
Yeah, okay. I really like Will and Grace.
Let me grab, Ashley says, it's extremely difficult to get the necessary medical clearance to transition in the United States. Young people typically start hormone blockers before puberty, but hormone therapy doesn't start without at least a year of documented therapy and aren't eligible for surgery until at least 16, unless it's deemed absolutely necessary by a qualified therapist and physician. There were very few children who actually fully transition that young, and again, it requires documentation and years of, I'm assuming, of therapy.
That's a big misconception. If you look up detransitioners or even go to the website where we try to give a voice to the detransition community, they're always saying that was just 1, 2, 3. Like really for 1 or 2 appointments, and the doctor's like, "Here, have these drugs." Yeah. So if you go and look at the stories that detrans youth are telling, they're starting to really come forward in very alarming numbers and talk about what happened. They are just seeing doctors that sometimes even actively encourage them when they're unsure. And they're like, well, I'm not really sure. And they're like, oh, you'll feel so much better when you do this. So there's a lot of stories that really contradict this misconception that there's all these checks put in place and that nobody's ever, no child is being wrongly medicalized. A lot of young people are wrongly medicalized and they're rushed through the system. They're going in for 1 or 2 sessions. They know exactly what to say. They've YouTubed it. So they know what the key things are to say.
Oh, I see. So they know what to say to get what they want.
Right.
Got it. Huh. Okay. Let me grab another one if I can. Logic says, so I'm actually a bi cross-dresser drag dude, whatever you want to call it.
Bi cross-dresser drag dude. Okay, cool.
I would agree with the idea of fragile masculinity because that is a place in my mind that I can kind of see I come from. Logic, thank you for sharing that.
I don't understand. That's a place in your mind that you can see you come from?
That he says he can come from that he has that in his own head.
Yeah, I don't think all men, hashtag not all men. So when I'm never really talking in terms of like every single person in the world, like add a hashtag not all men to everything I say, like hashtag not all gay men.
Right.
Hashtag not all lesbians. Take it as like, I'm saying a lot of men have some.
Yeah. And what Logic Rex is saying is, that's where he comes from sometimes, that he's agreeing. And thank you for sharing that. I mean, a lot of men wouldn't share that, right? I mean, like I have, all men have a level of that. Me too. I mean, all men have a level of that, of am I alpha enough, right? Every male has some of that, some more than others, right? But we all have some of that. I think we do.
Yeah, and I'd love to see a breakdown of the idea of even cross-dressing. Like, what is that? There's this idea of like men's clothes and women's clothes, and like, why not just clothes? Like, who gendered the clothing? All these things come from very old kind of traditions that have been a long time to differentiate between the sexes. They're helpful in some ways. Like if you put a little boy in blue, then maybe like people aren't going to be like, oh, what a cute little girl. But it doesn't mean that the blue actually literally means.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. They're cultural issues. I agree.
Yeah.
So, Sabrina says
little skirts. I'm Middle Eastern. Men wear long. What I can't think of the name right now. Like a sort of
almost like a robe. It's flowing.
Wear, right? Yep. Also, traditionally kohl around the eyes. Mm-hmm. KHOL, worn unisex on both men and women to protect, this goes back years and years and years, sure, to protect the sensitive sort of Arab eye area from the sun. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of breaking of the rules throughout history, but the rules are kind of arbitrary and,
Yep. Sabrina says, I'm just happy to see people discussing this in a civil adult manner. Thank you. Yeah. Well, there we go. That's the point of the show. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. So Nicole asks, how should we handle children? Should it be more gender neutral, less binary, and more accepting overall? Well, I have two daughters.
Let them be.
And what I did it with my daughters. My daughters now are 16 and 10. And there's two problems here. One of them is cultural, but the other one's just simply.
Right.
What I mean by that is I want my second daughter to be exactly like my first daughter, because then it's easier to raise them, right? So just from simplicity, that's all, right? If you like the same things that your sister liked, I don't have to buy new stuff.
I don't have to buy new toys.
Absolutely. So just from a simplicity point, I want them all to be the same. Mm-hmm. But for anyone who's had kids or has kids in their life or have grown up with siblings, they aren't the same. Right. So what I did is I just gave my kids all types of stuff, and they picked what they liked, and that's what it was. And I remember my oldest daughter, I gave both of them trains when they were little. And when my oldest daughter, when she grabbed it, she turned the train immediately into a doll. Like she started talking, and I'm Mr. Train, blah, blah.
Oh, wow.
And my youngest one played with the trains.
Aww.
Just totally different. Just each one picked the train differently. So I just let them be. I think that's my thing.
I think that's really the perfect way to look at it. Just let them be and don't analyze, don't overanalyze, and don't let the world analyze. Don't let the world put ideas on your kid. Like you're seeing right now, Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt's kid. Yep. And people have been just putting all this stuff on this kid to the extent that you can actually Google lots of influencers and articles being like, she was assigned female at birth. Why are you putting that on their kid? They've said that this is their daughter. Their kid hasn't said any of that. Like, there's a lot of stuff, ideas from the external world being put onto children. I would be afraid to have kids right now. I'd be afraid to send my kids to school where they're teaching gender ideology and parents have no idea. And in a lot of cases where they're going along with the transition of kids who have rapid onset gender dysphoria and not even telling the parents about it. There's
Go on, go tell me about that. Not telling the parents about it. Go ahead.
There's schools and policies where they don't tell the parents about it. There's situations where kids are taken away from their parents if their parents don't agree with it. There was a big case in Texas with a little boy. I wrote about it.
Wow.
Who was the mother was trying to transition the kid, and the father was losing the right to weigh in on the situation.
Wow.
And the judge in Texas had sided with the mother, who seems like she has like by proxy Munchausen syndrome. I said that backwards. Munchausen by proxy. And it's a serious.
I don't know what that is.
It's really disturbing. Like when you've got your own issues and you're projecting them.
Got it. Thank you.
And which is what happened with Angelina Jolie's kids. You got all these people around the world projecting on the child and really kind of making the child why? Because you want short hair and you want to wear suits.
Right.
This is a boy, and you know.
I get it. Tom says, being in a party that has embraced gay rights from the beginning and now seeing gay sort of being erased is kind of upsetting. What would be the advice of libertarians about how to approach this? That's a great question. I think Tom's right. I mean, you know, marriage equality, we were for it in the 70s, right? When the Democrats were still evolving.
Right.
We were already for it then. And the vast majority of libertarians are like, whatever, marry who you want, love who you want, all good. But again, the details of the LGBT community, many libertarians don't know it. So
yeah, a lot of Republicans and Democrats, a lot of people don't know it. And I'm a lifelong, Democrat, and I'm very much so to the center of that equation. Because there's a lot of things going on that are being kept from Democrats that are being done in the thick of the night. You know,
so like, should libertarians just be, if we're not, right, if I'm not a member of the LGBT community and I'm a libertarian, should I just be hands off? I guess that's what Tom's asking. Should I just be hands off? Should I just say, you know what, there's a civil war going on. Let me walk away until they kind of fix this. Should I be saying something? Should I?
I think there's always power in speaking up for minority groups who are subjugated, who are being silenced, who are being no platformed. These ideas I'm talking about have been no platformed.
Don't you have a book that's being pulled off the shelf or something?
I do.
Tell me about that.
So if you speak up about this stuff, you are punished. It's not something where you can speak up about it and you're not going to get punished. There are consequences, and that is how they've kept people silent and quiet about this. So no, the more people who speak up, the easier it becomes. The month after J.K. Rowling posted my work to her page, my publisher informed me that they were pulling my novel off the shelf.
Wow.
And that's when the company was going to switch hands and be handed over to the CEO's left-hand person. And when I questioned the decision, one thing among many things that came back in that response was, do you have a transgender child? Indicating to me that something I already knew, which was that there was an issue with my work.
Got it.
That because I was the first person to kind of put to and say, hey, why are we doing this when kids haven't even come close to reaching cognitive brain development? Because I was a psychology major. I switched to literature, so my interest has always been very much towards things like brain development. And I said, why isn't anybody in the medical community talking about this? Why isn't anyone, we know about this. This isn't some new thing that we're unaware of. Why is nobody discussing this as it relates to how unethical it is?
Sure.
Medicalize, pathologize, medicalize, and do surgeries on kids way before they have a chance to reach cognitive brain development, which is the prefrontal cortex
part
of the brain that understands things like consequences. repercussions.
Mm-hmm.
And
they're not ready to make it the right decision like this, a life-changing decision.
They don't. There's no way they can give informed consent to it, which is another thing that put me on the outs. I think with publishing, is that I think a year and a half ago, when detrans youth started to say, "How can we fight this in courts?" I said, "You argue that you cannot give informed consent." And then I was the only non-detransitioner added to a group that was discussing this, the legality of this. And, when I left, they renamed the group Informed Consent.
So there we go.
So I'm kind of a person who's been informing. And so I'm really, if someone's got a transgender child or someone feels very strongly about this, I'm the person that they want to shut up.
Got it. Okay.
And I'm persona non grata. So, and this happens to a lot of people. If you want to know about sports statistics, you're going to look at Fonda Beatles, Emma Hilton. If you want to know about different aspects of things that we're not supposed to talk about, different people will kind of go to find out about things from different women that have spoken up, particularly the ones who are very vocal and visible and haven't really been too shy or scared of what's going to happen. My life's work is being pulled down.
Wow.
But I'm kind of Buddhist about it. I'm like,
so
what is meant to happen will happen.
Let me grab a couple more comments if I could.
Okay.
Nikki says, I love G.I. Joes and trucks as a little girl. I was a tomboy, but I never wanted to be a boy. I liked boys. I grew up to be a hot chick that the guys liked, and I liked them. Well, there we go. See, you can play with G.I. Joes and trucks and still be the hot chick if you want to. It's all good. Absolutely.
Yeah, a lot of that's a variation of what we're talking about here, that you didn't want to be a boy. I think with a lot of young lesbians, there are definitely those moments where you're like, wait, should I have been a boy? And those moments can last a while. Last time I remember thinking something like that, I think I was like maybe like 20.
There's a similar thing that happens.
And dealing with your sexuality, being in a world where it's not going to be accepted, where life is going to be harder. You're really grappling with things like sexuality and forcing yourself into stereotypes that don't really feel quite right to you. A lot of different ideas are going to go through a mind that's not yet completely developed, hasn't really reached full cognitive brain development. As I said, the portion of the brain that develops a sense of identity and understand and a deeper understanding of how you're impacted by the world around you and the environment around you and the expectations that are placed on you.
But I think there's something that there may be some good news here, because it's a similar thing, not the same, but a similar thing that happens with people who are biracial, right? A similar thing. And not so much now. When I was a kid, I'm in my 50s, right? I'm in my 50s. And when I was a kid, there was no other box. There was no biracial box to check. Right. And everybody said, are you black or are you white? And I went through and of course, America calls me black, but I went through my phases as a kid as thinking, I'm the blackest guy there is, or I'm the whitest guy there is, or I embrace different parts of of who I am as I moved through my life as a kid, trying to figure out who I was too. Luckily now, if you're biracial now, it's much more the norm. You can just go, I'm biracial, and be like, people are like, okay, that's a thing now.
Right.
In the 60s and 70s, that wasn't a thing, but now it is a thing. And I think the same thing will happen with the sexuality issues. People won't be concerned on whether you don't have to become the boy or the girl, if that makes any sense. I think the future will be better.
Separate sexuality with style. Style has been very much conflated with sexuality.
But race was a similar thing, right? If you're black, again, it's 60s or 70s, you dress a certain way, you talk a certain way. Right. If you're white, you talk a certain way, you act a certain way. And there's similarities.
In your own culture, did you have people say to you, like in your culture, oh, you're not white enough, or you're not
all the time.
Right.
All the time.
I'm Arab. I'm a half and half. So I'm Arab and the other side is like, a combination of things like Irish and Russian. So there is in your own culture a sense of, not being this enough or not being that
Mhm.
enough. And it is confusing. It's confusing for me when I put out my novel. I found that trying to put it under my Arabic name wasn't getting me anywhere. And I finally had a really awesome person I was working with say, it could be your name, try changing
Mhm.
it. And I did, and boom, I was signed.
There we go.
It is a situation where people don't always consider that they don't realize that this is an issue. Like I've been yanked off a plane,
Mhm.
dangerous Arab. And people don't realize that sort of thing, especially they take things very much at face
Sure.
value. And in your own culture, then you've got to face those questions and issues all over again, where
Okay.
you're teased for being too light-skinned, or you're teased
Sure.
for being too dark.
Yep.
It's always something, isn't it?
Absolutely. So
Always
let me grab a couple more if I could. And Angel says, I was a tomboy too, and I have a son who liked his sister's dolls and dressing up as princesses.
Awesome.
We are both straight. When people said stuff about him playing with dolls, I would say, maybe he's just going to be a good dad. That's a nice comeback. I like that comeback.
Absolutely.
I have always told my kids that I don't care if they're gay, bi, whatever. I will love them the same. I do the same with my daughters.
Yeah.
I don't know if my younger daughter is whatever. I have no idea. She's 10. I don't know. And I don't care. It's not an issue. She is what she is.
I think for parents now, though, they do have to pay a lot more attention to the internet. A lot of detrans youth have told me that that's where they went wrong. That's where they fell into the rabbit hole. That's where they started getting this idea in their head, Tumblr, and that to kind of pull away from it for parents who are struggling with this, that it was better for the parents to not come at them too much. But rather to redirect their attention. So a friend of mine, she's a friend of mine now, who is a young DT lesbian, or DT means detransition lesbian. She found it very helpful that her mom let her go and work with horses, which was a big thing. Like she loved horses, and being away from the internet for a period of time, she was able to grow and reroute her brain. And now she's like, oh my God, thank God my mother didn't. I said DT. She's actually desisting. There's a difference. Desisting means you want to transition, and detransition means you were allowed to, and then you're trying to change back to get back to who you were. So for her, and for a number of young people I've spoken to about this, it was more about being allowed to get away from the internet. So for parents who are watching this, I would say really pay attention to what your kid is getting into online.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
It's a good point. Thank you for that.
Because it's very confusing. It's a minefield out there, and strangers are getting a hold of your kids' brains. You don't know who they are. You don't know what intentions they have.
Yep.
And they're signing up under profiles. They could say they're a kid. They're not a kid. They could be getting all up in your kid's head. And it's not something I've seen just once or twice.
A bunch, huh?
It's a lot. So
someone brought this up. El Gregorio, I think I said that right, says, I'm starting to think that a lot of these plus groups who are non-LGBTs are just self-hating people who have infiltrated and are trying to make it difficult for the rest of us LGBTs. He says, that's my opinion. Prove me right or wrong. I mean, I'm gay, I'm feminine, but I've always been comfortable being a gay man. I am what I am. You think that's true or no? Do you think he's...
I've talked about infiltration a lot.
Oh, that's a real thing.
If you read through my stuff, I talk about infiltration constantly, and it is a very real thing. The dyke mark's been infiltrated. So now we're at a point in history where lesbians are being told that if they can't accept that plenty of lesbians have dick and like dick, that they should stay home.
Wow.
And not come to the parade. So the people heading up the parade have told lesbians not to show up.
Wow.
You also have people like Ghassan, who have dismantled the one man, one woman rule. And people like Nancy Pelosi, who are proposing that we remove gendered language like mother and father.
Oh, yeah.
From house rules. So there's a lot of kind of shady, low-key stuff going on. And Ghassan, by the way, again, this is neither here nor there, but would look like you or somebody's brother or father, didn't really do any changes, and says, I'm a lesbian. and is dating another male who identifies as trans, who also identifies as a lesbian. And when women had a problem with the dismantling of rules that were put in place to protect women 100 years ago to have an equal seat at the table, he said to suck his. Let me try and suck his.
It's fine. It's the internet. Say what you want.
I feel bad.
Okay. Anyways, we got it. We got it. So
you get it, and,
yes.
and that's who's in charge.
Yeah.
That's who's running the show, and it's not just Dakota. There are others who are also like, I identify as she and her, and la la la, and now. So it's not. We're not protecting transsexuals. You said earlier, how do I be a good ally? Be a good ally by telling the truth.
I like that. Let me cover that now.
Actual transsexual people who are OG.
Yes.
The best way to protect them is to tell the truth. Say it in a way that people can understand. Try not to be too afraid. People are going to get a little kooky sometimes.
Yeah. No. I don't have a problem with that. I'm with you. Linda has a very good point. He says, be an ally for the person over the group.
Yeah.
I like that, Linda. That's great. I love that. Yeah. Good advice.
That's how you could be an ally. Telling the truth is a good way to go. Finding out the truth and then telling the truth. A lot of people are just speaking. They don't know what the hell they're talking about.
Yeah.
They haven't looked into it. They've maybe seen a headline. Maybe they've read something and just taken it at face value. They haven't really looked into it. If you don't want to look into it, go to someone who looks into stuff and adds a ton of, I add links to everything. So everything I write is like link,
yep.
link, proof, fact.
Right.
I put an article about what happened at the DC riots, and I had to add a disclaimer saying, I'm not a fan of Trump. I'm a fan of truth. If anyone reading it would just see fact, quote, link, photo, without my opinion in it, and it reads to them as Trump fan.
Got it. Okay.
All I've done is
I like that. Well, you have some fans here. Lauren says Julia is awesome, and I'm Lebanese American.
Oh my God, that's awesome.
There we go. Craig says Julia, thank you.
Thank
so that's
you,
good. There we go. Craig says wore makeup and dressed as a child and was feminine. If my parents started transitioning me, I'd hate them today. I love being a gay dude.
I do not blame you. And you know, a lot of gay men share that sentiment and have expressed that sentiment. It's not coming to mind right now. There's a pretty well-known gay man who came forward and said something very similar, that like he would have been transitioned by adults today, and that's it. If it comes to me, I'll mention it. I've written about it though. It's in articles I've written about.
Logic Rexel says thank you for bringing Julia up. She's awesome. So you've got some fans here. Yes.
Thank you.
Brian talks of the Munchausen syndrome by proxy. Is a mental health problem in which a caregiver makes up or causes an illness or injury to a person under his or her care, such as a child or an elderly adult or person with disability. So there we go. Thank you for that clarity, Brian. I appreciate that.
Yeah, that's a good and full dictionary type definition of what that is, and it is a problem with parents kind of projecting ideas onto kids, and it's pretty creepy.
There we go. Well, Jamie likes me. He's always seen Larry Sharpe as Larry Sharpe, not the black-white Larry Sharpe. It's fine. You can see me as any Larry Sharpe you like. I'm totally fine now. I'm good now. All good. So, yes. P.S. Tom says, P.S. Stop making me grow as a person. I'm sorry, Tom. I'm trying. I'm sorry. Absolutely. What am I doing? I apologize.
Otherwise, he's not doing his job.
There we go. I love that. So, Byron says, I mean, let's face facts. Kilts are just knee-high length plaid skirts. Also, I raised a lesbian daughter and did not ever push her in any direction as far as sexuality is concerned. The only lesson I taught her is taxation is theft. There we go.
Is theft. And quickly on that, I had a parent from the Middle East not too long ago whose daughter came out as a lesbian to her, and the first thing she asked her was, well, what's your gender identity? Because this is what the media is teaching her. This is what the media is teaching parents to question. And their kid who says, I'm a lesbian, are you a man? Because that's what she's asking her child.
Got it. I see.
Well, are you a lesbian or are you just a man? And this is important for people to know who have kids and who are raising kids, is to ignore a lot of what the media is teaching you, because it's gender ideology. It's a belief system. If you want to be Catholic, if you want to be Jewish, if you want to be Buddhist, whatever, fine. But you can't enforce your belief systems on an entire
Absolutely.
people. Put it into law.
Mm-hmm.
Legally force people to lie. This is Orwellian. You can't. When do we get to a point where we legally can force people to lie and say a cat is a dog?
Yes. No, I'm with you. I absolutely agree.
Humanity. I'm all about supporting everybody. I'm all about making sure everybody's rights are taken care of, that they are treated with fairness and equality. Everyone has the right to pursue happiness and to be happy and to be left alone and to live in peace. What they do not have a right to do is to enforce their own belief system on other people legally and through language, or to control the language that we are and are not allowed to use.
Absolutely. And it's all about respect. Without a doubt, it's about respect.
Exactly.
And with that in mind, listen to this. Larry Sharpe here, host of the Sharpe Way show. And boy, do we need to start coming together and healing now more than ever. Best way to do that? Respect. We got to respect each other so we can start to come together. How can we facilitate that? Head over to the advocates.org/human respect tests. Yes, there's a test for human respect. You didn't think there was? There is. Take that test. About 3 minutes. That's it. It's done. Share it online. Share it on your social media. Let other people see it. Let them take the test. Share it with others. Let's start talking about respect. Let's start talking about healing. Let's find the right answer for us to move forward. The advocates.org human respect tests. See that? You gave me a spot to put my sponsor, so I put my sponsor up.
Perfect segue to such a great little speech there.
See that? I'm good at what I do, absolutely. And for those of you who want more on what you were talking about, the article that you wrote, head on over to thevelvetchronicle.com. You can see more of the things that Julia has written about and more of the things that she's talking about, what she's doing. Please head over there and give her some love over there. Give her some respect. That would be amazing. Let me grab a couple more if I could, a couple of these comments. I'm getting so many comments. I appreciate you staying a little bit long tonight. I really appreciate that.
Hey,
So,
I love
I don't care who you sleep with unless it's with me. See that? That's pretty easy. I like that. Yes, that's good. I like the cat dog lie analogy. Stealing that one.
Go for it.
Well, there we go. That's it. Oh, done deal. I love that. So let me ask you before we wrap this up, is there anything that you want to bring up? Something you want to talk about that we haven't covered?
I think we've covered a lot. Abigail Schreier just put out a good book on this. I actually gave a little input and spoke to her, and she's checked in with a lot of people when she wrote that.
What is the name of her book? Do you remember?
I do. Irreversible Damage.
There we go. Okay, great.
And I would check out Lisa Lippman, who coined ROGD and statistics on teenagers. And I'm not really sure. Just check out in general. A lot of this stuff is linked to the work that I do. And I provide as much proof to people as possible, and a lot of different ways in which are places where they can find help if they're struggling. If parents are struggling, a lot of people don't consider parents in all this.
No, I get you completely. Absolutely.
There are parents who are really upsetting and pushing. And then there's parents who are really not being considered. They're being kind of cast to the side. Like, feelings are not important. Your struggle is not important. We don't care what you think. You have to just support this and get on board. And they're like, well, but I know this has to do with ROGD. I know this isn't who my kid is. And there's no support being offered to those parents. And I try to offer them support and DM and, sometimes like Zoom and stuff like that, just to be someone who listens and
that's nice.
Shares, because nobody's really paying attention to what's happening in the schools, what the kids are taught.
Yes.
My
that is one of my biggest issues, right? Is that the more the schools have control, the more the schools do things without parental consent. And that's what, and then that becomes the norm. Right now, government decides when and if you transition. That's the wrong answer, right?
Yeah,
that's the wrong answer.
My nieces and nephews were picking this up in school where, a teacher was saying, oh, well, this child who wears sparkles and pink and la la la, we need to ask pronouns before we assume. So there's this idea of teachers saying, like, if someone's incorrectly female, let's ask them. Which is really upsetting, particularly to the lesbian community, because it not only pathologizes nonconformity, which is kind of almost like a natural state of being a lot of the time for young lesbians. It pathologizes, but there's also this idea perpetuated of there's an incorrect way to be female. There's a right way and there's a wrong way to do it, and if someone does it wrong, you need to question whether or not they're a girl.
Yes. Oh, yes.
With that crazy thought, because that's a problem.
Absolutely. Oh, you're right. There's a lot of issues we have to work on.
Yeah.
Well, I want to say thank you so much for coming on. Again, guys, if you want more, thevelvetchronicle.com. And for me, if you want to, please head over to patreon.com/Sharpe. Support the show if you can. If you want to take that human respect test, it's in the show notes. Just click that link. You'll go right there. If you like those CBD products, grownselection.com, libertarian-owned business. Sharpe Way 20 gets 20% off of your creams, your powders, whatever you like. Please enjoy if that's what you like to do. I think it's amazing. Julia, thank you so much for today.
Thank you. It's so great to talk to you.
Absolutely. Everybody else,